peace, better health, where healing meets wholeness and science dances with spirit. Today, we welcome Dr. Cindi Saj, a powerhouse of mental health, wisdom, yoga, EMDR, and somatic healing. With over 15 years in therapy, academia, and research, Dr. Cindy bridges the gap between evidence and embodiment, showing us how the mind heals the body and the body beautifully heals the mind. If you're ready to reconnect with your inner healer, this episode is for you. So, Cindy, you have studied burnout, stress, and now the healing power of somatic practices. What inspired your shift from traditional talk therapy to more embodied methods like EMDR and yoga?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, as you mentioned, I've been in the field for about 15 years. I have learned a lot of different theoretical orientations. I've learned everything from cognitive behavioral therapy. I've learned solution focused brief therapy, internal family systems, dialectical behavioral therapy. I've learned a lot of different talk therapy approaches. And while they do have value, I'm always looking to see what evidence based research suggests is kind of most effective. And so with that exploration, I kept hearing a lot about EMDR. And EMDR is something that you kind of, you hear about it, you hear about so many positive results, but it's hard to believe that it's so effective. And so part of me, I think, explored EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as a means to heal, just to kind of debunk it or kind of to see what was going on with it. And so when I got the training and when I did my practicum and I started to recognize not only the benefits that I experienced in myself while doing the work to learn it, I also started seeing really great results with the clients that I was working with. And so basically with, my experience working with talk therapy, I started to kind of see how we can use our body to also heal. So yes, our mind is important for our mental health, but so is this idea that our body can heal us mentally. If you think about when our body gets cut, we automatically our body works to start to kind of heal from that cut. When we get a virus or an illness, our body automatically produces, these pathogens or these antipathogens that kind of help heal that virus or that illness. And same with kind of our minds, when we experience something traumatic, so whether it is the death of a loved one or a car accident, or whether it is even seeing a snake or something really kind of disturbing for us, our body and our mind has a capacity to help us get through that in a way that doesn't continuously trigger us. Our body can help us feel calm, relaxed, soothed, but our body can also let us get into this fight, flight, and freeze when we're being threatened. And so our body can help us, run away if we see a bear or run away if we see a snake. But the problem exists is if our body keeps getting us to run and there's no snake anymore or there's no bear anymore. And, we've kind of tapped into the ability to talk through those things, but now we're also seeing, ways to use our body, whether it's through movement, whether it's through shaking, whether it's through eye movement, that help us also heal. And so that's kind of where my journey has brought me as a practitioner, is not only to kind of continually learn what's out there for my clients, but also to offer the best approach to healing. And so far I've seen bilateral stimulation and EMDR as two of the best things that are out there.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So, was there a moment in your own journey where your body spoke louder than your mind?
Yeah, and so talking a little bit about burnout. I've been in the field, like I mentioned, for a very long time, and I love my job. And so when I love my job, I want to always do it. And so I really can fill up my own plate. I can kind of keep myself, working with clients from 6 a.m. sometimes to 8 p.m. That can be a full day. Taking breaks and stuff is sometimes that I may skip lunch sometimes, or I may not necessarily get out to do my steps. And so after a while, my body started to say like, "Hey, you're not doing okay." It kept kind of telling me different ways, whether it was illnesses or whether it was just really, bad headaches or not sleeping well. And I kind of started to see my body respond that, "Hey, you're not doing so well." And it actually took my body breaking my leg through a trail run that I did for me to actually slow down. So they always say if you don't take time for your wellness, you'll take time for your illness or your injury. And that's kind of what the lesson that I've learned a couple of times. And so the first time was breaking my leg, and other times when I'm just starting to work too hard, I get sick. And when I get sick, then it's like this forced, 5 days off to recover. And so it really is, your body does have needs. And when you don't address your needs, it will show up in other ways.
That resonates so much. Healing isn't just inside, it's felt, stored, and released throughout the body. So, EMDR is often seen as a trauma therapy, but many still find it mysterious. How would you explain EMDR to someone new? And what makes it so effective for trauma resolution?
Yeah, and so EMDR is used a lot with trauma, but they're actually finding a lot of research to indicate that, EMDR can work from everything to addiction, to pain management, to anxiety, to depression, to low self-esteem. So there's a lot of benefits that EMDR can help all those different kind of mental struggles, but we're also seeing it a lot with trauma, and it works to help trauma is because when we kind of store memories, when they're traumatic memories, they don't always get put in the same place. And so EMDR translates to eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So the big words that we want to keep in mind are desensitization and reprocessing. So when we have a traumatic memory, often it's very sensitive to us. It feels very, disturbing. It feels very big. It feels, often uncomfortable. And that's where EMDR works to kind of help us remove the emotional connection that we have to the event. Thinking about trauma is stored in the body, and it's also really stored in the mind in the sense that the trauma has happened, but we often keep reliving it. We keep thinking about it, and we keep then, activating our mind, activating our body. So thinking about an example is the one time you see a snake, and maybe you really don't like snakes, and you see the snake, and then it kind of gets imprinted into your memory of this really big, scary snake. The event happens and maybe nothing actually occurs out of the event. The snake kind of goes its own way and you go your own way. But then you start to think about the snake when the snake's long gone. You're thinking about the snake at night, you're thinking about the snake in the shower, you're thinking with the snake at work. And then your body doesn't know the difference between something that's actually in front of you and something you're just thinking. So your body then responds to the snake all the time, where you get in that fight, flight, and freeze. And so, your brain has a connection to your body to this response. And so we're talking about trauma. Trauma really is a response to a memory. And we kind of keep replaying often the trauma or the traumatic event or something about the trauma that disturbs us. And so, what EMDR does is it desensitizes that trigger or that big kind of trauma event. So, it would desensitize the idea of seeing a snake. It would no longer activate us to fight, flight, and freeze. We would see the snake and then we'd reprocess it. We'd be able to put it away in our mind and in our memory as an animal that often, really can't really hurt us. It just looks like it can, or we believe that it can. They talk about fear as, false experiences appearing real, right? This idea that we fear things because we have this like vision of the worst case scenario. So EMDR helps with a cognitive lens to unpack the big traumas that we remember and desensitizes them and then reprocesses them in a way that doesn't feel so traumatic and doesn't feel so disturbing. A great example that I like to talk to clients about is, say, for example, your brain is a big database, and say it kind of has this idea of looking at this cabinet that you store all these files in. So if you think about your brain as this big filing cabinet, sometimes trauma or this vision of a snake might kind of not know where to process, right? We might not have a file for snakes. And so, instead of putting this memory away, this memory sticks on the top of the filing cabinet. And that's how trauma then gets kind of stored, right? It doesn't have a place to go, neatly into the filing cabinet. So it stays on top. And every time you walk by that filing cabinet or you think about the filing cabinet, it's the first thing you see because it's sitting on top and it hasn't been put away. And so EMDR really does open up that file where you see this disturbing memory, you work through it and you reprocess it, and then you put it away in the filing cabinet so it doesn't keep jumping and scaring you, or it doesn't keep kind of coming up and being a disturbing event. So that's kind of how I work to explain it to clients. I have another metaphor if you're curious to hear it, but does that make sense a little bit about what EMDR does and how it works?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, do you think everyone can benefit from EMDR without even a big trauma story?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Not everyone can benefit from EMDR. Sometimes people dissociate, and that's something that we have to kind of work with, right? And sometimes when clients, have really big memories, they often kind of get stuck outside of their mind and body. And we want to make sure clients are always able to kind of cognitively explore their traumas, right? If their traumas are so activating and so triggering that they can't even sit in a room or they can't really kind of, work through the next steps, there's a lot of work we need to do before we get to EMDR. And so yes, in time, everyone can, and there's benefits to everyone to explore EMDR, but there are a couple of precautions, and there's, the 8 stages of EMDR just to kind of make sure that it's done safely. With that being said, as I mentioned earlier, EMDR is not just for trauma. So it can be from everything from self esteem, it could work through anxiety, depression, it could work through, work thinking about the worst case scenarios. It can go back to this idea of having feelings of, I'm unwanted or unimportant or I'm incompetent or I'm inadequate or I'm, not safe. Those are all things that are beliefs that people generally have in the world, especially what's happening in our society and different countries. And so, yes, EMDR can really help reduce any really big, uncomfortable feelings that don't serve the person.
That's a powerful reframe. Healing is for everyone, not just those with crisis level stories.
And as a world, there's a lot of hurt and there's a lot of sadness and sorrow and anxiety and depression in the world. And this is one modality that when you access it, it does open up a whole new like optimism to live and to be happy and to see the world a different way. And so you talk about, cognitive therapies. This is really that fast forward version. EMDR does change cognitive, neural pathways in your brain. It does change connections that you make. It will change your outlook on life, which is a pretty neat thing. And especially when people get stuck in thoughts of, depression or anxiety or even suicide ideation and low self-esteem. These are all things that as a society we're struggling with. And EMDR can help.
hmm Absolutely. So, you blend yoga with mental health practices. How does movement create shift in mood, mindset, or even stored trauma?
Great question. And so tying EMDR, which I mentioned is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, it's not just eye movement. And then even if it is, thinking about the title EMDR and eye movement is to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. So it is bilateral. So bilateral means left, right, left, right. And when we think about EMDR and we think about our brain and how we kind of tap into that healing mechanism, it really is through bilateral stimulation, and that is going from the left to the right or the right to the left, back and forth. Yoga often does the same. Whatever you do on one side of your body, you'll do on the other. You're right. We always find this balance within yoga. Movement, connecting yoga movement and bilateral stimulation, walking. If you think about what happens when you walk, you take, your left foot, your right foot, your left foot, your right foot. That is bilateral stimulation. And, we could use that to the advantage of to reprocess. If you look back at the history of how EMDR was created, it was from someone walking in the forest. And, this idea of looking up at the trees and looking from the left tree to the right tree to the left tree to the right tree while walking. So the movement part is really important as well. And we're starting to do a lot more research around how movement does activate our brain. As human beings, we are meant to move. We are meant to move our arms and our legs. And we're meant to jump. We're meant to crawl. Like we've always been made to move. Looking back at society, when we don't move is when we get illness and when we get disease. When we move, it does help our digestion. It helps our mental health. It helps our physical health. And so movement really is medicine. And when we're able to combine stuff like, a positive outlook or positive psychology, that would be positive affirmations around I am good enough or I am worthy. If we're starting to like intentionally think these things and combining it with walking or bilateral stimulation or, moving our body with yoga or moving our eyes, this all does make a really great scientific formulation for positive outcome shifts in our positive memories and shifts away from the negative disturbingness. And so we've really tapped into the ability for our body to actually work for us to heal our mind. And our mind, we've seen heals our body, right? When we're thinking, positive thoughts around health and wellness, we can, definitely bring ourselves to more an optimistic outlook of life where we are more confident, where our body then, heals. Looking at other research around optimism or kind of the positive energies that are out there, there's studies where you talk to trees and you see them actually grow. You talk to different food sources, whether it's rice, and you can kind of see the energy that does help these things grow and create healthier versions of self. And whether it is through movement or whether it is through energy or whether it is through optimism, we're able to kind of tap into things that do good for society and do good for us.
That's the beauty of yoga. It's not about flexibility of the body, but flexibility of being.
100%.
Mhm. So, Dr. Cindy Saj reminded us that healing isn't just a mental exercise, it's a sacred partnership between mind and body. Whether it's EMDR, yoga, or somatic stillness, the path back to wholeness is waiting within you. So, take a break, move gently, trust your body. It remembers how to heal. Until next time, stay aware, stay aligned.